Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Splatter, Naked Blood, a notoriously violent Japanese horror film that was directed by Hisayasu Sato. Now historically, this film was listed as a 1995 release, but just recently it has been changed to 1996 per IMDb and Wikipedia, so pick a day, pick a year, whatever. But before we start the review, I need to be clear about something here. Every time I watch this movie, I appreciate it more and more. If you can handle some nasty gore in your horror films, Naked Blood is a must-see film. If you want a well-rounded knowledge of Japanese horror films from the 1990s, because Japan released a number of nasty horror films during that decade, and Naked Blood is arguably the pinnacle of that era. Now, in this film, our main character is an amateur scientist. He's only like 17 years old, but he's pretty smart. And he's conducting brain secretion research in his free time. And his goal is to create the ultimate painkiller for human beings. A drug that theoretically increases the production of endorphins in the brain in order to offset pain. And he believes that he has actually succeeded. So he names the drug My Son and decides to test this drug on 3 schoolgirls without their knowledge. And that leads to some psychologically induced, deep-seated masochism. So the first few times I watched Naked Blood, I felt like the pacing was a bit on the slow side. But when I was watching the film again recently, I actually gained a greater appreciation for the non-horror content. It's definitely weird, but I liked it because it establishes a science gone wrong scenario, which is a refreshing theme for a horror film. The premise itself is actually pretty fascinating when you think about it, and the character interaction is pretty interesting because it has some good dialogue. Some discussions involve topics like insomnia and stuff like that. The way the scientist kid also befriends one of the girls would never really work in real life, but considering how she herself is a bit of an oddball person, it makes for some very unorthodox moments between the two. And there are a few unpredictable moments to enjoy as well. One other surprise is that you will probably recognize the lead actor of this film, who is very popular nowadays, Sadao Abe. In this film, he plays a weirdo with an unhealthy obsession with his research, to the point where he's willing to risk the lives of these girls and even spy on them as part of his research. There's also a pretty bizarre backstory regarding his father that's actually kind of creepy. It's definitely odd watching Abe in a movie this nasty, because when I had first seen this film, I wasn't really that familiar with this actor. So, years later when I rewatched it again, I was like, oh man, that's the same actor. This guy's popular now. Really weird seeing him in a really nasty, low-budget gore film like this. But it's pretty cool. Now, Naked Blood is most well-known for its extremely vile bloodletting. Yes, there are a few scenes in this movie that most people will not be able to sit through. That's a good thing for me. But during the final half hour, specifically, there are some ghastly moments of self-mutilation that are among the most memorable in the history of Japanese horror cinema. I am not over-exaggerating. These scenes are pretty unforgettable, and they hit pretty hard as visceral horror imagery. But judging them from a filmmaking standpoint, the quality of the practical gore effects are pretty excellent here. If you're a fan of legendary special effects and makeup effects artists like Tom Savini, who have contributed so much to the horror genre over the decades, that's just another reason to watch Naked Blood, because a few scenes in this film are pretty jaw-dropping in terms of the special effects work here. And there are no MPAA-mandated cutaway shots in this sucker. The MPAA had no hand in regulating this film at all, obviously because it's a Japanese film. So the camera just sits there during these gore scenes, and it just bathes the film in depravity during those moments. It's great. But the horror content is not just limited to these gruesome moments. There is some cool imagery involving dreams and and even a cactus plant. Yes, one of the girls in this film uses a cactus plant in her apartment to stimulate her brain waves as a substitute for sleep because she's an insomniac. It's pretty mesmerizing, actually, and some of my favorite scenes involve this cactus plant because they're hypnotic and use kind of a moody score. There's definitely an artistry here that helps to raise Naked Blood above being a simple gore film. I've mentioned before on my channel, Hisayasu Sato is a talented filmmaker, which is usually why I think of him first when seeking out exploitation-style films from Japan, along with some other directors like Koji Wakamatsu and Takashi Ishii. Now, whether you classify Naked Blood as an exploitation film or not doesn't really matter. The fact remains that there are a lot of exploitation-style films from Japan that are pretty boring to watch. The violence and boobies can only hold your attention for so long. You need to be a pretty special director to make these movies work and to make them truly interesting and memorable. And Sato has a great visual style that you'll notice if you watch multiple films of him. You'll notice certain themes visually that pop up in them. And he's capable of holding your interest outside of the gore scenes, which is pretty important for films like this. And on top of that, he brings the goods in terms of the set pieces. So this guy's good. Naked Blood is deliberately paced, with most of the memorable gore being backloaded to the second half of the film, but the runtime is only 1 hour and 17 minutes long, so the pacing overall is pretty solid. One side note is that this film is kind of a remake or connected to one of Sato's earlier films called Pleasure Kill from 1987. I think I actually reviewed that in my Asian horror playlist. But like I said earlier, if you can handle some nasty gore in your movies, you absolutely have to watch this film. It's a landmark film that came out during an interesting era of Japanese horror. Now, the DVD is out of print, the Region 1 DVD. I do have it in my collection, but it's pretty expensive now if you want to buy that. However, and get this, it's actually available on the Netflix DVD rental service that still exists. And I'm a member of this service because you can actually get a lot of movies for a pretty cheap monthly subscription fee. And it's the DVDs that come in the mail. So I'm still actually subscribed to that. And you wouldn't imagine how much money I saved renting movies from that service instead of renting them streaming on Amazon or wherever else. So it's still a good value if you're willing to subscribe to that, and it still has a pretty good selection of films. So this is available on that, and it's not really available on a legit streaming service that I was able to find. So think about that for a minute. But yes, check this one out if you think you can handle it. And as always, I'll see you next time.